the show with that. I always got to get the whole little NFL in there. But I want to start out. I mentioned the Western Conference Finals. And again, you listen to the Kwame Fisher-Jones Show on Talk 860 AM every Saturday at 4 to 5 p.m. I opened up discussing Chris Paul. Or actually, excuse me, I opened up discussing the Western Conference Finals. And before I break down the X's and O's of the Western Conference Finals, there's a player that's participating in his first Western Conference Finals in Chris Paul. Now, for those of you who don't know, Chris Paul is regarded amongst some as one of the top point guards in NBA history. He is looked upon as one of the best players to ever play on hardwood. And amongst other people, he's looked at as a habitual underachiever, a guy who gets way too much credit, and a guy that gets the acclaim doesn't match the achievement, if you will. And now he's being praised for finally reaching the Western Conference Finals. Not the NBA Finals, the Conference Finals. And I'm bothered by that. 13 seasons in the league. 13 seasons in the league, and I'm seeing headlines like, has Chris Paul's 41-point closeout game against the 5th-seeded Utah Jazz with a rookie point guard justified his career? Is this redemption for Chris Paul? And I'll be honest with you, it was irking my soul. It's utterly ridiculous that a player for 13 seasons could somehow be redeemed by making a Western Conference Finals his first in his career. Now, I get it. Chris Paul's been a great guy off the court. Now, I'm not talking about him personally. I'm talking about him professionally. I get it. He's a pillar in the community. He's an asset to his community, pays all his taxes. You know, that's beautiful. That's fantastic. I'm talking about him professionally. I'm talking about the basketball player between the white lines. I don't get how now Chris Paul's career is redeemed because he made a Western Conference Finals. And it got me to thinking. It made me think about a story. I mean, I'm going to share a story with you. It made me think about a time in my life. So when I graduated high school, long time, 1996, I was so excited. I was like, yo, I did it. I proved everybody wrong. I did it. Nobody can tell me I graduated high school. And the cat I was close to at the time, Sam Silver, says to me, yo, what are you so excited about? You should have graduated high school. And I had no response, no retort. Had nothing to respond with that to because he was right. Now, I could say, well, statistically, black men are this, considering that I went to an affluent high school. But my life began in Camden, New Jersey, where the high school graduation rate is much different than it is amongst African Americans in Voorhees. But to Sam, that didn't matter. Because, see, Sam looked at me as a black guy, and every black guy in my class was going to college, whether it was community college or four-year university. And it was expected of you to do such. So I take you there to bring you here. Chris Paul is supposed to be, you keep telling me this, you keep selling me that Chris Paul is one of the top point guards in NBA history. So shouldn't he have been playing? Shouldn't it be expected for him to make it to the Western Conference Finals? Why are we giving an adult a round of applause for arriving on time? That's what you're supposed to do. The fact that he hasn't done it is an indictment on his skill set or an indictment on those who have elevated his skill set. Because the fact of the matter is, I have said for years, if Chris Paul played in the 80s, he'd be Mark Price. If he played in the 90s, he'd be Terrell Brandon. I don't think Chris Paul is a better point guard than Kevin Johnson. But for some reason, we're told he is. For some reason, we're told he's a pit bull. When all I see is a dude that continuously loses in the second round of the playoffs. Now, this year, he went to a team. He pulled a Kevin Durant and went to a team that didn't need him. and hopped on their success, and I'm supposed to somehow give him a round of applause, standing ovation? Somehow give testimony that he's legitimized his career? No. If anything, he proved what we already knew, that he was not the leader he was billed to be. So before we sit and congratulate a cat like Chris Paul, let's look at what he did in the playoffs. He gave Donovan Mitchell work in a closeout game. Donovan Mitchell's a rookie. He should do that. He won his division running away. He's got one of the top offensive coaches in the NBA, one of the top offensive players in the NBA. He's got a champion in Trevor Ariza, a top draft pick in Eric Gordon. He should do that. Now, before you say what happened in LA, well, let's look at what happened when Chris Paul left. The Clippers didn't make the playoffs, but their record wasn't that bad. They were above 500 despite a myriad of injuries, despite trading what was their franchise player in Blake Griffin. They still managed to play well. Blake Griffin went to the playoffs without Chris Paul. Went to the second round without Chris Paul, if I'm not mistaken. But when Chris Paul gets there, they get to the same level. But it's because of Chris Paul. It's lopsided. I'm so confused with where we're ranking Chris Paul and why we're ranking him there. Yes, he's a good player. And he is a point guard, a traditional point guard in the sense of the word, in a league that is dominated by combo guards. But they don't get no awards for that. To quote the great philosopher Drake, we don't give no trophies for that. Since when are we giving second? He's not even second place. When are we giving fifth place awards? When are we televising the guys that didn't get nominated for the Grammys? Like, when are we doing that? Let's not change the rules for Chris Paul. Now, I was willing to reserve my judgment to see how far they got in the playoffs, but when I see redemption and Chris Paul, I can't help but laugh. This is the dude that punched another man in the baby maker in college. He did that. This is the dude that went to New Orleans / Charlotte, and Byron Scott, who went to 2 NBA finals back-to-back, and let that team wound to go from leading the Spurs 3-1 in the playoffs to having the Spurs come back and beat them. That was a Chris Paul-led team. This is the same Chris Paul that went to the Clippers years later, did the same thing with the Houston Rockets, being down 3-1, then the Rockets come back and beat them. That was Chris Paul's team. And that was the same Chris Paul that watched the Golden State Warriors start out light years behind him, catch up to him, and pass him. The same Warriors team that's about to hand him his you-know-what again. So before we start giving Chris Paul a round of applause, let's wait for a minute and think what you're really clapping for. You're going to salute a dude. How about you salute Steph Curry? How about we salute Klay Thompson? And how about we salute Draymond Green? Because for some reason, Daryl Morey and the Houston Rockets believe that the only way to beat them is to accumulate every free agent and trade for every all-star imaginable or 6-man in the year imaginable rather than going back and scouting and drafting. One team did it organically, and another team is trying to put it together at the last minute. But, we'll talk about that when we come back from the break. So I had to get that off my chest before we started that. I had to get that off my chest before I get into the Western Conference Finals. We're going to break down. I'm going to talk a little bit about why the Rockets, I'll be shocked if the Rockets win a game in this series. I'll be utterly surprised if they win a game in this series. And I'll go into detail why. I'll also talk about why I believe the Golden State Warriors could possibly run the table and maybe lose one game on their way to the next NBA title, which is scary to think considering I didn't think that they would. I felt like had they run into the right team, they would lose again, but they're not going to run into that right team. So we'll come back on the other side. We'll talk more about that. You listen to the Kwame Fisher-Jones Show on WWDB AM Talk 860.